What is the most messed up thing you have seen? When I was about 9, my friend Jason called to say he was coming over. This was the 80s, so no cell phones. So, after he was taking way too long to get there, I called. His grandma said he just left a little bit ago. So, I waited. He still didn't show. We lived in a dangerous part of town in Section 8, and so I started to get nervous again. He was only a block away. Why would it take so long? I called Gram again, and she was like, well, maybe he saw a friend on the way. Check outside. So, I did. I went outside, and his dead body was by the entrance to my building. His coat and shoes were gone. It seems someone murdered a little boy for his fine stuff. I had the pleasure of discovering him and testifying at the guy's grand jury later. I didn't see the accident, but while living in Jamaica I saw a man carrying a mangled body just walking in the country. I later learned they were brothers and worked construction together. One brother fell from a great height, and the other brother was just carrying his body, walking towards the hospital. Even though the brother had died on impact, he was just in a terrible sad mania. When I was in high school, the drama teacher was walking around on the catwalk high above the auditorium, and she got her hair stuck in an exhaust fan. At that time her hair was almost to her knees. Her scalp was ripped off, and I saw her in the hallway with towels and blood everywhere. She was in shock and shivering on the ground. The school went into lockdown, and we were escorted to a different area, so we didn't have to see the aftermath. Unfortunately, I saw it before that happened. She was in the hospital for nearly a year recovering. Car accident. OMW. Home from work, I stopped to call 911 and got out to check on people. The guy I had checked on was holding his intestines in his lap. I don't have a clue how I was able to stay composed for his sake, telling him everything was fine. It was just a scratch, yada yada. When I was a paramedic, I got called for a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It was an 80-year-old man, apparently the day before he buried his sister, and she was the last one of his family and friends left. Everyone in his life had died. He decided to put a 12 gauge under his jaw and end it all. The wall was covered in skull fragments, chunks of brain matter, and what was left of his head just looked like mangled hamburger meat. That wasn't the worst part though. IDK how this happens, but his face was laying next to his head completely intact, halfway dangling off of the pillow that he'd laid down on. That was almost 10 years ago, and I'm still bothered by it. When I was 13, I saw my best friend get plowed by a car when he was crossing the street. The side he started at had backed up traffic, and so you couldn't see the other side of the road. Alex just walked right across without looking, and a guy in a Buick sedan nailed him. He flew over the end of the car. He tried to get up, but when he did, both of his femurs snapped. I think that's when he passed out. That was about 20 years ago, and I still think about that every now and again. Woke up one night to a loud bang, looked out the window, and saw someone had crashed into the tree next to the apartment I lived in. Saw the driver get out and run away. I called the cops and went outside to survey the damage. The driver had hit someone and pinned her head against the tree. The top half of her head was missing. She was barely breathing, unconscious and obviously dying. Then a kid comes running across the street followed by an adult. The kid sees the body and realizes it's his mother. Starts screaming, "That's my mom." Goes up to the body and loses his screaming. The adult that was with him starts pulling him away. Turns out the driver was the mother's boyfriend. He was going like 60 in a 25 zone and swerved off the road aiming for her. F'd up. Back when I worked at Walmart, I walked into the bathroom one day before my shift and seen this guy hunched over the sink with a nozzle on a can of compressed air up his nose, spraying up in his nose with blood spewing out all over the place. Left me in shock for a second before I just left and closed the door and went and told my manager. I'm a physician, and I was doing mandatory rural work in a small town in the border between Colombia and Venezuela. I heard a bunch of yelling and screams from the nurses, so I expected something bad coming into the air. There was a car crash close to the hospital, and they brought the wounded. There was a 5-year-old kid who was missing a hand here and had multiple cuts on his body, but he seemed to be alive. So we rushed and started working on him, and during my examination I was getting ready to intubate him. Put a tube on his throat to protect his airway, and when I opened his mouth I saw a lot of blood and brain tissue coming down from his cranium into the back of his throat. That means he had a cranial base fracture, and his cranial contents were just draining into his esophagus. I knew at the time there was nothing else for me to do, so I immediately switched my focus to his sister, 13 to 15-year-old sister, who was in a better shape. One of the worst days of my life for sure. Saw a car hit a man as he was riding his bike. In the bike lane, the man literally flipped in the air and made a scream that to this day I can't really describe, but he got hit from the back, which obviously caught him off guard, flipped and then landed in a ditch. The driver of the car stopped immediately and came out to his aid. Only explanation that makes sense is that she, the driver, was distracted because the man was rightfully in the bike lane, and she should have seen him from quarter of a mile away. Firefighter here. I have seen some ones that stick in my head are mostly children. I distinctly remember one. His burns were extreme to say the least. All we could do was try and cool them until ambulance arrived. All he could do was howl a long, guttural wail that I can still hear, as if I was there today. He didn't last long. Another was a wildfire body surge. Parent wrapping themselves over the young kid to try and save them from the inevitable. The worst part is the way this tortures your mind for years afterward. They become your own children/partner in your dreams, but the memory itself is still there, and you know it's not. Former medic here. My first though was this kid who had a super unusual skin disease. His skin would just slide off if you even touched him. He wasn't meant to have survived long, but at this point he was 3. He was also, for lack of a better term, point dead. We couldn't intubate him because his esophagus shed as we were placing the tube, narrowing his airway to almost nothing. We worked and dropped lines. We bagged and did compressions. The bag wouldn't stay on his face. The skin sliding all around wouldn't allow us to seal. It was a refined nightmare. I was on holiday at a lake in my country and 2 kids, brother and sister, drowned. Only one of them was found while I was at the beach, and they tried to resuscitate her for an hour with no luck. Her mother, father and another one of their sister was there on the beach, obviously crying. It was really sad to watch them have hope and pray for an hour, just to see her die too. The other kid's body was found another few hours later. Rest in peace. I hope I use the right words. English is not my first language. Visited family in Laos, went to another relative's house, and there was a laptop on the table. Saw a video paused. I was curious as to what it was, so I pressed play, and there was this dude tied by all limbs, and then they proceeded to pull in both directions. The guy was screaming in agony, and then it just popped. His body was torn in half. Then the screaming stopped, but it followed by a horrifying low grunting and gurgling sound. Blood and guts just all over the pavement. I was horrified by it. My whole body just felt weak, and I was shaking uncontrollably, starting thinking, is this my relative's doing? Come to it. Later I realized he's a government official investigating this crime. That was a big relief, but damn, the damage was done. I'd witnessed an act of murder. Never will I forget how the screaming and the sound of a human body just torn apart so violently, plus the aftermath of what happened. Maybe not that effed up to someone else, or if you watched this kind of thing in a video, but effed up to me, because it happened to me, so I saw it all up close and first hand. It's just before midnight, and I'm on a motorcycle coming home. I'm literally 1 street from my turn and a guy blows a stop sign and T-bones me. Drivers often don't see motorcycles. Most drivers' brains are like wired to react to a set of headlights, so one headlight doesn't register as a moving vehicle. Anyway, I get hit on the right side and somehow twisted around the bike, landing on the pavement, and the bike is on top of both my legs, and his front bumper is pinning the bike onto me. I sit up. Not smart to move after a serious accident, and don't remember feeling pain. I had the wind knocked out of me, but I raised my left arm and saw it was completely twisted around backward. It was broken in half above the elbow, which was effed up for me to see my own arm all mangled. I immediately knew this was a serious accident. I look up at the driver, expecting him to get out and help me, exchange insurance info, etc. I'm mostly concerned with getting out of the street, so I'm not hit by another car. The driver backs his car off my bike, then puts it drive and takes off, which was the second effed up thing to see. A bystander saw the crash, saw that I'm in an intersection, immobile, and cars are coming. She runs into oncoming traffic to stop the cars from running me over. Very cool and super not effed up. The cars stop, and I think Maybe 5 to 6 people all came out of their vehicles to help. I'm still in shock, so I can't remember feeling any pain. Someone lifts the bike off my legs, and, out of reflex, I adjust myself. Really not smart given what happened. I raised my legs to scoot back, and felt my left leg lift and my right thigh and knee lift. But my right foot didn't go with it. I realized my leg, like my arm, was also broken in half, which I couldn't see, but I could feel how effed up the situation was. I knew that it's really bad to move anything near a broken bone, because the bone can punch through the skin and expose the wound to open air. So, while panic sobbing, I ask a guy, "Am my leg's broken? Did the bone punch through?" "Can you see? It's bad if the bone punches through, right?" He looks at my leg, pauses, then says, "Oh, you're gonna be cool, man. Don't worry." Clearly trying not to mention my pant leg was soaked in blood and the bone clearly punched through. So I have a plate in my arm and a rod in my leg now. Silver lining. The guy who hit me and effed off, his bumper broke off as he escaped and his license plate was attached to it. So he was caught almost immediately and charged with felony hit and run. Maybe this isn't as effed up as most of the other stories, but thought I'd share anyway.